My father fired me, believed my brother's lies, and disowned me. 6 months later, I took his company down Reddit stories. I gave 12 years to the family business, only to be framed for the crimes my brother committed. They left me homeless, ruined, and forgotten. But when I uncovered proof of $1 million theft, I rebuilt my life and returned with the one thing they couldn't fake: the truth. Hi, I'm Kai, 36, and 6 months ago my father looked me dead in the eyes, pointed toward the door of the company I'd given 12 years of my life to, and said the words you never forget no matter how old you are. "You're no longer my son." Security dragged me out of the building while my little brother watched with this smug, satisfied grin, the kind of grin that tells you he's been waiting years for this moment. And the worst part? My father believed every lie he told him. But that was 6 months ago. Back then, I was the operations director of Parker Industrial Supply, a third-generation manufacturing company with $40 million annual revenue, 8 CNC lines, and a legacy that started with my grandfather sweating over a drill press in a garage. I spent 12 years learning this business from the literal floor up. Warehouse shifts at 5 a.m., driving forklifts in freezing weather, running lathes and mills, fixing busted conveyors, negotiating supplier contracts, reworking logistics nightmares that would give lesser men an aneurysm. I earned every promotion. My father, Larry Parker, made sure of that. His favorite mantra was, "Earn your place or get out." So I earned it. Then there was Sean, my younger brother by 2 years, my father's golden child by 20 miles. Sean, who partied his way through a business degree my father paid for. Sean, who strolled into the company at 25 and landed directly in the VP of Sales chair without touching a single pallet or wrench. Sean, who got a company car, a corner office, and a salary that made mine look like internship pay. My father called it strategic placement. What he meant was, "Sean reminds me of me, and you remind me of your grandfather, and your grandfather wasn't the favorite." But here's the thing about being the overlooked son. You learn to pay attention. You learn to spot inconsistencies. You learn to document everything because you know nobody is going to defend you on instinct. 8 months before my life imploded, I noticed the first discrepancies. Small things. Purchase orders for materials we never received. Inflated travel expenses. Inventory that didn't quite match the reports. Sales trip costs that doubled even when revenue didn't. Tiny red flags, the kind you only notice when you actually work. And when you see one, you start seeing all of them. I made the mistake, the massive, life-altering mistake, of mentioning it to my father during a weekly leadership meeting. I wasn't accusatory. I wasn't emotional. I wasn't even naming Sean. I simply asked, "Should I run an audit on sales expense reports? Numbers aren't lining up." My father slammed his folder shut so hard a pen rolled off the table. "You questioning your brother's work, Kai?" That was the moment I felt the ground beneath me tilt. "No, Dad," I said carefully. "I'm just trying to keep the books clean." He leaned forward, fire in his eyes. "Sean brings in clients. Sean brings in revenue. The sales department spends money because they make money. You operations people always think you know better, when the truth is, we wouldn't survive a month without sales." You operations people cut deeper than I expected. That was when I realized something important. My father wasn't defending the company. He was defending Sean. And I was suddenly the threat. But I knew I wasn't crazy, so I quietly showed the discrepancies to Arthur, our CFO. Old-school accountant, no nonsense, trusted his calculator more than software. Arthur reviewed the numbers for 20 straight minutes. Finally set down his glasses and said, "You're right. Something's off." He scribbled figures on a legal pad, columns, ratios, margins, projections. Then he said words that turned my stomach. "Based on what you've shown me, we're looking at 300,000 missing. Maybe more. 300,000. Potentially 500,000. Enough to kill a company. Enough to put someone in prison." I asked him, Do we tell my father? Arthur sighed, long defeated. Kai, your father won't believe this about Sean. But I was still naive enough to think proof mattered more than favoritism. That's what pushed me into the worst meeting of my life. Me. My father. Sean. A binder full of evidence. And a career I didn't realize I was burying. I walked in hoping for justice. I walked out disowned. And tomorrow? We begin the fallout. I knew the meeting was doomed the moment I walked into my father's office and saw Sean already there, leaning back in a leather chair like he owned the place, sipping coffee he definitely didn't pay for, legs crossed like he was posing for corporate frauds to monthly. My father didn't greet me. Didn't ask why I'd called the meeting. Didn't even look at the binder in my hand. He just said, "Well? What's so urgent?" I set the binder on his desk. Thick. Tabbed. Highlighted. The kind of binder no one assembles unless something is very wrong. I've found irregularities in the financials. Your interpretation, Sean murmured, like the smug little parasite he was. I ignored him. I walked my father through everything. Purchase orders for materials never delivered. Vendor names that didn't exist in state business registries. Expense reports that doubled with no revenue increase. Patterns that appeared only in sales, never in operations, never in purchasing, never in manufacturing. I laid it all out, piece by piece, detail by detail. My father flipped through the binder with growing irritation, but not at the theft. At me. When I finished, he leaned back, crossed his arms, and asked, "You brought me here to accuse your brother of stealing from this company?" "I brought you proof," I corrected. "We need an independent audit." Sean made a wounded noise in his throat. "Dad, I don't even know what to say. I mean, Kai's been under a lot of pressure. I've noticed it for months." I whipped my head toward him. "What the hell are you talking about?" Sean sighed dramatically and looked at my father as if sharing a painful truth. "He's been snapping at staff. Making mistakes in shipping. He's late half the time. Arthur and I have been covering for him." My father turned sharply. "Is that true?" "No," I said. "None of that is true." Sean shook his head sadly. "See? He gets angry at everything now. He's paranoid. You ever watch someone try to murder you using only their words? That's what it felt like." My father stood. "I've seen the changes myself. I just didn't want to believe it. But this," he gestured at the binder, "this obsession? This paranoia? This attempt to drag your own brother through the mud? Dad," I tried again, "the numbers don't lie. Look at the vendors. The numbers you chose," he snapped. "The vendors you claim don't exist. The expenses you think are suspicious. All of this is your interpretation." Sean leaned forward. "I think Kai is having some kind of breakdown." That was the moment the floor dropped. Sean wasn't just denying the theft. He was painting me as unstable. I could literally see him laying the groundwork to bury me alive. My father nodded, slowly, like the pieces were finally falling into place, but into the wrong picture. "I've had enough." He closed the binder with a loud thud. "You're suspended. 2 weeks. No pay." "What? For doing my job? For attacking family?" He spat. "For trying to pit us against each other. For jealousy." I stared at my father, the man who taught me to double-check every invoice, every assay, every inventory count. "You're making a mistake," I said quietly. He stepped closer, face inches from mine. "No, Kai. The mistake was trusting you." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "You want me gone," I said, realizing it. "That's what this is." "I want my sons to get along," he said. "But clearly, that's impossible with you here. Get out." Sean didn't say a word as I walked out. He didn't need to. His smirk said everything. 2 days into my unpaid suspension, I still believed I could fix things. That if I gathered more evidence, presented it better, found something undeniable. My father would finally see the truth. On day 3, my father called. "Come to the office. 4 p.m. sharp." Something in his tone made my blood go cold. I arrived early. Barbara from HR was there. Sean was there. Security was outside the door. My father slid a folder across the table. "We've completed our own internal review." I opened it. The world froze. My signature. My authorization codes. My purchase approvals. All tied to fake vendors. All tied to fake transactions. All identical to the ones I discovered, but with my name swapped in. Sean had copy-pasted his crimes onto me. "This is forged," I said. Sean leaned back, arms folded, perfectly calm. "Or maybe you're finally realizing what you've done." My father's voice was ice. "You're fired. Security will escort you out." "And Kai?" I looked up. "You're not my son anymore." 6 months later, he would choke on those words. 6 months later, I would hand him evidence that destroyed everything he thought he knew. But that day, I walked out with 3 garbage bags, $1,840 in the bank, and no family left. There's a moment in every downfall where you stop falling and realize, oh, I've hit the bottom. Everything from here on is just scraping along the floor. For me, that moment wasn't being fired. It wasn't being disowned. It wasn't even security dragging me out of the building in front of people I'd worked beside for a decade. No. Rock bottom was night 5. Cold November rain hammering the roof of my car while I tried to sleep in the Walmart parking lot, curled up in the back seat with a jacket for a blanket and 2 garbage bags of my life as a pillow. I'd tried applying for apartments. Every landlord ran a background check. Every landlord contacted Parker Industrial. Every landlord heard whatever Barbara and my father were saying. Denied. 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 At that point, I could have walked into a leasing office with gold bars and they would have asked, "And how did you steal those?" So I slept in my car. At 3 a.m., security tapped on my window with a flashlight like I was a raccoon going through trash. "Move along," the guy said. "Or we called the cops." I drove to another Walmart and tried again. By day 9, I was living on dollar store noodles and shame. By day 12, I smelled like sadness and public restrooms. By day 16, I cried in a gas station bathroom because I dropped a $0.79 ramen packet in a puddle and couldn't afford to replace it. Yeah. That was the moment. You can stomach being broke. You can stomach being homeless. But the humiliation? The silence? The way people look through you? That hits different. I was going to die stocking shelves, I thought. Because that's where I finally found work, at a 24-hour hardware store run by a guy named Carlos who didn't ask questions. "You show up on time, you work hard, you're hired," he told me. "Don't care if you're a ghost or a fugitive as long as you can lift 50 pounds. Shift 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., wage $12 an hour. Benefits? Absolutely not. But it was a job. One that made my back hurt in a way that reminded me I was still alive. By day 23 of homelessness, I found a studio apartment so small I could stretch out my arms and touch both walls. There was mold on the mold. The radiator screamed like a dying robot. The bathroom had texture. But when I closed the door that first night, locked it, and finally slept horizontally for the first time in 3 weeks, it felt like a 5-star resort. Month 2 was when the rumors caught up with me. Kai stole from his family. Kai embezzled hundreds of thousands. Kai tried to frame his brother. Kai's going to prison. I found out when an old coworker bumped into me on the bus and recoiled like I'd become contagious. "You doing okay?" she asked, clearly hoping I'd say no so she could leave. This is what being accused of stealing from your own family does. It turns you radioactive. No one wants to be near you in case the fallout hits them, too. But here's the thing about working nights at a hardware store while your life is in ruins. You have time to think. Time to replay every conversation, every spreadsheet, every invoice, every moment that didn't make sense. And somewhere between stocking concrete mix at 3 a.m. and eating instant coffee with a spoon because I was too tired to boil water, I had a realization. If Sean successfully framed me, why didn't they call the cops? Why didn't they file charges? Why didn't my father push the narrative publicly? There was only one answer. They couldn't. Because a real police investigation would uncover a real paper trail. Because they knew something was wrong. Because deep down my father knew, or at least suspected, that pressing charges would drag Sean into the spotlight with me. So they needed me ruined, not arrested. That realization hit harder than the night security guard who threatened to tase me for sleeping behind a dumpster. There was evidence left somewhere. Something Sean hadn't destroyed. Something my father hadn't seen. Something I could use. I just didn't know where it was. Until month 5. When an email arrived from an address I didn't recognize. No subject. Just one line. You were right. I'm sorry. Start here. Attached. A spreadsheet packed with flagged transactions. Vendor names highlighted in red. Amounts circled. Dates annotated. At the bottom was a name. Arthur. The CFO. The man who'd betrayed me to protect himself. He finally grew a conscience. Or Sean pushed too far. Or my father's blind loyalty was dragging the company into the grave. I didn't care why. All I cared about was this. I finally had a way to fight back. And I was about to unleash absolute hell. I didn't sleep the night Arthur sent me that spreadsheet. Didn't eat. Barely blinked. I just sat there in my shoebox apartment, hunched over my dying laptop, scrolling through line after line of financial carnage with a feeling I hadn't felt in months. Purpose. Everything was there. Every missing dollar. Every fake vendor. Every inflated expense report. Every internal transfer that didn't match any real shipment or real purchase. It was like staring at the autopsy of the company I'd given 12 years of my life to. Arthur hadn't just given me a spreadsheet. He'd given me a map. And I was about to follow it straight into my brother's grave. For the next 3 weeks, my routine became simple. 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. Stock shelves at the hardware store. 7 a.m. bus home. 8 a.m. to noon deep dive into Parker Industrial's crime scene. Sleep. Repeat. Coffee became a food group. My apartment became a conspiracy board. My face looked like I'd been dragged through the apocalypse, and then run over for good measure. But the deeper I dug, the more everything clicked. I started emailing the vendors listed in the suspicious purchase orders. Most didn't respond. Some bounced back as non-existent. But then I hit gold. A small fabrication shop in Ohio responded saying, "We haven't worked with Parker Industrial since 2019. Why do you ask?" Arthur's spreadsheet showed a $47,000 purchase from them dated 8 months ago. I sat back and laughed. Actually laughed. A real, broken, slightly insane laugh that echoed off the moldy walls. Sean wasn't just sloppy. He was arrogant. Arrogant enough to think no one would ever question the fake vendors he created or the bogus invoices he approved. And he built the whole thing using real small shops as camouflage. When the owners finally replied, every email was the same. "We didn't create this invoice. We don't recognize this transaction. This isn't our work." I documented everything. Screenshots. Recorded calls. PDFs. Folders inside folders. If Sean wanted to frame me, I was going to frame him with the truth. Then one morning, after a brutal shift unloading a pallet of concrete bags, I walked out to the parking lot to find Arthur waiting. He looked terrible. Hair disheveled. Shirt wrinkled. Eyes tired like he hadn't slept in days. "Kai," he said. "We need to talk." He pushed a flash drive into my hand. 3 years of bank records. Every account. Every transfer. Every hidden payment. The nuclear weapon I didn't know I needed. "Why are you doing this?" I asked. He swallowed hard. "Because Sean is out of control. And because your father won't see it until the company is ashes. And because you helped bury me," I said. He closed his eyes. "Yes. And I've regretted it every single day since." He walked away before I could say anything else. I had the evidence. Now I just needed a way to use it. It took another month. Another month of sleepless nights and caffeine-fueled detective work. Another month of cross-referencing purchase orders with bank transfers, tracking shell companies, studying patterns of theft that became obvious once you knew where to look. Final total? $892,000. My brother hadn't just stolen. He hadn't just skimmed. He'd turned Parker Industrial into his personal ATM, inflated expense reports, fake vendors, kickback deals, phantom shipments, fabricated invoices. And the worst part? He'd been getting bolder every year. This wasn't petty theft. This was a full-blown embezzlement scheme. The kind that destroys companies. The kind that sends people to federal prison. I printed everything. Bound it in a folder thick enough to qualify as a weapon. Then I made calls. Not to lawyers. Not to the police. To competitors. To one competitor in particular. Connolly Manufacturing. The one company that had been trying to acquire Parker Industrial for over a decade. A company with money. Lawyers. Resources. Motives. And an appetite for blood. I told the VP of Acquisitions I had information about Parker Industrial that would significantly impact the company's valuation. He gave me a meeting the very next day. I walked into Connolly's shiny headquarters in a second-hand dress shirt, carrying a folder that could decapitate a career. The VP looked at me like I was an overdue bill. "You've got 15 minutes, he said. "Make it count." I slid the folder across his desk. "Your competitor is bleeding out," I said. "And I can show you exactly who's holding the knife." He opened it. Read one page. Then another. Then another. 15 minutes became 40. His eyes went from skeptical to predatory. "This is legit?" he asked finally. "Every number. Every transaction. Every signature. And why bring this to us?" I leaned back. "Because my father fired me for uncovering the theft. Because my brother framed me. Because I want to watch them both lose everything." The VP smiled slowly. "Let's talk about your salary requirements." That was the moment everything shifted. I wasn't powerless anymore. I wasn't homeless anymore. I wasn't the disgraced son anymore. I was holding the lever that was about to flip their world upside down. And I planned to pull it hard. Corporate revenge doesn't happen with explosions or dramatic confrontations. It happens with paperwork. Cold. Precise. Lethal. And I was about to watch it unfold from the inside. 2 weeks after handing Connolly Manufacturing the evidence, the first strike landed. Not a lawsuit. Not a police raid. A letter. A very polite, very corporate letter addressed to the Parker Industrial Supply Board of Directors. Based on credible information regarding financial irregularities, we recommend an independent audit prior to any further valuation discussions. Translation. We know your house is on fire. Let us check where the bodies are buried. My father rejected the suggestion in under an hour. He didn't just say no. He called Connolly's VP personally to say, according to the VP, "Tell your company to stay the hell away from mine." Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Because here's the thing about powerful men who think they're still in control. They always underestimate how fast the ground shifts under their feet. Connolly sent letter 2 directly to the board members who were not related to my father. Outside investors. People who didn't care about family. People who cared about money. They read the letter. Saw the numbers. Smelled the smoke. Then called an emergency board meeting without my father. Outvoted him 2-3. Audit approved. I was smiling so hard in my new office at Connolly that my coworker thought I'd won the lottery. Not yet, I thought. But very, very soon. The audit team arrived at Parker Industrial like a pack of accountants trained by Navy SEALs. They took over a conference room. Set up laptops. Stacked boxes of documents. Dragged out every file, every invoice, every digital record. They tore through everything. My father tried hiding documents. They found them. Sean tried blocking access to sales accounts. IT bypassed him. It took them 2 weeks to confirm everything I'd uncovered. It took them 6 weeks to discover even more. Final number wasn't $892,000 like I calculated. It was $1. 98 million. Nearly $2 million stolen by my brother over 3 years. 2 million. Enough for 20 years in federal prison. Enough to sink a company. Enough to ruin everyone attached to the business. And then, the FBI got involved. Because when you cross certain thresholds, the government stops asking and starts kicking down doors. Agents stormed Parker Industrial with warrants. Confiscated computers. Interviewed employees. Seized documents. Sean tried to run. Literally. Bought a last-minute ticket to Cancun and made it all the way to the boarding gate. Agents tackled him in front of a full flight of horrified tourists. Someone filmed it on their phone and uploaded it to TikTok. Corporate Nepo baby arrested trying to flee the country. 4 million views in a week. I watched it twice a day before work like meditation. My father? He had a heart attack the same morning the agents raided his office. Not fatal. But enough to knock him flat, hospitalized for a week. The company he'd built his entire life was collapsing, his golden child was in handcuffs, and everything he believed about his family had detonated in his face. Meanwhile, Connolly prepared their real move. Offer number 2. Not to my father. To the board. Purchase price, $18 million. Less than half what Parker Industrial was worth before the scandal. Take it, or watch the company crumble under legal fees, federal investigations, and investor lawsuits. My father protested. The board overruled him unanimously. The company was sold in January. Arthur visited me 2 days after the sale. Your father wants to talk to you, he said. Tell him to email Connolly's HR department, I replied. He's in the hospital, Arthur added quietly. Ah. He wanted a deathbed apology. Shame for him he wasn't dying. But I went anyway. Not for him. For me. To let him see exactly who he'd thrown away. He looked small. Gray. Old in a way that didn't match his age. Kai, he said. Voice cracked. Broken. Arthur showed me everything. What Sean did. What I did to you. Long pause. I made a mistake. No, I said, pulling up a chair. You made a choice. He flinched. I laid out everything for him. Sleeping in my car. Begging for job interviews. Being blacklisted. Living on cup noodles. Stocking shelves while trying to clear my name. His eyes filled with tears. Mine didn't. You want to know the worst part? I asked. It wasn't losing the job. It wasn't losing the company. It wasn't even losing you. It was his face crumbling that kept me talking. It was realizing I never mattered. Sean was the son you wanted. I was the son who had to prove himself every day. And even then, wasn't good enough. The heart monitor beeped faster. And the only reason you're apologizing now is because you finally saw the mess you helped create. Silence. Heavy. Ugly. He whispered. Can we fix this? No, I said. And that's the difference between you and me. When you threw me away, I rebuilt myself. When Sean fell apart, he dragged you with him. I stood. Connolly will treat your employees well. They'll survive. You will, too. I reached the door. Kai, he called weakly. Are you working for them? Operations director, I said. Starting next month. His face broke. Good. Because he finally understood. He didn't just lose his company. He lost the son who actually knew how to save it. The day Sean's trial date was announced, I was sitting in my new office at Connolly, a real office, with a door, a window, and a nameplate. Not a broom closet. Not a warehouse break room. A space that said, "Yes. I earned this." Adrian knocked once and stepped in. "Federal trial. March," he said. "Wire fraud, bank fraud, interstate embezzlement. They're stacking charges like Lego bricks." I nodded. He studied me for a second. "You going to attend?" "No," I said. "I don't need to see him fall. I've already seen enough." Adrian smirked. "Good answer. Keep your focus where it matters." He left. And I got back to building the life my family tried to take from me. The next 3 months were strange. On the outside, my life was improving at record speed. New salary. New colleagues. New respect. New apartment, one with a working radiator and walls that didn't shed spores. New clothes. New routine. On the inside, I was still running on the survival instincts I'd grown in the darkness. I'd catch myself counting cans in my pantry to ration food. Checking corners of my apartment like someone else might be living there. Waking up at 3 a.m., expecting security to knock on my window. Trauma doesn't leave cleanly. It lingers in the wallpaper. But then one morning, while packing for work, a thought hit me. I don't need to survive anymore. I get to live. And for the first time in months, the air didn't feel heavy. Then Arthur showed up. He knocked on my apartment door holding 2 coffees and an envelope. "I thought you might want company," he said. We sat at my kitchen table, my new one, not the wobbly thrift store disaster I'd been using. He handed me the envelope. "Your father said you weren't answering his calls. Told me to give this to you." I took the envelope but didn't open it yet. "What is it?" I asked. "His share he wanted to leave to you," Arthur said softly. "What you would have inherited from the company if things hadn't gone the way they did. Blood money. Guilt money. A last-ditch apology with a signature." I opened it anyway. A check. $400,000. I stared at it for a long time. More money than I'd ever had at once. Enough to erase every bit of financial damage my father and Sean dragged me through. "What happened to him?" I asked. "Sold the house," Arthur said. "Moved to Arizona. Doctors said the stress could kill him, so he's trying to retire early." I took a sip of coffee. "Is he happy?" Arthur snorted. "No. But he's alive. Good for him." We sat in silence. "He asked if you might visit someday," Arthur said. I shrugged. "Someday is not today." "He thought you'd say that." Sean's trial finally came. I didn't go. Didn't watch clips. Didn't read articles. All I needed to know was in the text from Arthur. Guilty on all counts. 14 years federal. No parole. Sean cried in court. Pled that he was manipulated. Claimed he didn't know what he was signing. Blamed stress. Blamed pressure. Blamed mental health. Never blamed himself. But the judge didn't care. The evidence was airtight. My binders, my spreadsheets, my documentation, my months of early morning research? They were all exhibits in the case. And just like that, my brother, the golden child, the untouchable one, the favorite, went down in flames. He lit himself. Life moved on. I wasn't angry anymore. Not really. I was something harder to describe. Done. Done with proving myself. Done with chasing my father's approval. Done with trying to save people who would never save me. And weirdly, once I stopped caring, I felt free. My coworkers valued me. Adrian trusted me. Connolly wanted me on expansion projects. I had money in the bank, food in my fridge, and heat in my apartment. One night, after work, I sat by the window overlooking the city and realized this was the life I built. Not the life I inherited. Not the life I was given. Mine. And no one could take it this time. Then one last thing happened. A letter arrived in the mail. From Arizona. Handwritten. From my father. Not asking for forgiveness. Not begging for a relationship. Not even apologizing again. Just one line. I should have believed you. And I will live with that for the rest of my life. If someday you want to talk, I'll be here. I folded the letter. Put it in a drawer. Maybe someday. Not today. Not soon. But maybe. Because forgiveness isn't owed. And it isn't fast. It's a door you can choose to open when you're ready. And for once in my life, I get to be the one who decides. The strange thing about rebuilding your life is how quiet it is. Revenge is loud. Pain is loud. Betrayal is deafening. But stability? Peace? A fresh start? It whispers. One morning you wake up and realize your hands aren't shaking anymore. The nightmares come less often. The shadows in your apartment aren't memories of sleeping in your car. You stop checking your bank account every time you buy groceries. You stop expecting the worst from every knock on the door. You realize you're free. And then comes the next question. What do you do with freedom? Connolly kept me busy. I took over operations for a division 3 times bigger than what I'd run at Parker Industrial. Real systems. Real budgets. Real authority. Within months, we were restructuring supply chains, optimizing shipping routes, cutting costs, raising margins. Adrian called me into his office one afternoon. You're wasted on operations, he said. You should be running divisions, not departments. I blinked. Are you offering me a promotion? I'm offering you a path, he replied. You earned it. Funny how 12 years at my family's business got me suspicion and humiliation. And 6 months at a competitor got me respect. But the thing that hit me hardest wasn't the promotion. It was that no one here knew me as the son. No one saw me as the backup child, the disappointment, the afterthought. To them, I wasn't the kid who grew up in Larry Parker's shadow. I was the guy who brought in millions of dollars of assets and saved them from buying a sinking ship. I wasn't defined by my last name. I was defined by my work. And damn, that felt good. 2 months into the job, I rented a real apartment. Not a moldy shoebox. A 1-bedroom with hardwood floors, new appliances, a view of the river. The first night I moved in, I sat on the floor eating Chinese takeout because I didn't own a table yet. And I started laughing. Like, ridiculous, borderline hysterical laughing. Because 5 months earlier, I was eating cold instant ramen mixed with sink water. Now I was sitting in a bright living room with space, heat, food, stability. I earned this. It wasn't given. Wasn't subsidized. Wasn't granted because of my last name. I built it. Me. Kai. Not Larry's son. Not Sean's brother. Just me. Then came the last shock. My father called the Connolly office. I only knew because HR forwarded me the voicemail. This is Larry Parker. Could you please tell Kai I called? I'd like to talk to him, if he's willing. No pressure. Just whenever he wants. He sounded small. Tired. Like a man carrying the weight of $2 million in failure and the loss of both sons, one to prison, one to his own pride. I didn't return the call. Not out of anger. Just, not yet. Some wounds don't bleed anymore, but that doesn't mean they're healed. A few days later, Adrian called me into his office again. Your father is selling his belongings, he said. Arizona isn't cheap. His medical bills aren't either. I nodded. Not because I felt guilty, because I felt the opposite. For years I thought my father was invincible. Unshakable. Unbreakable. A man who couldn't be wrong and never admitted fault. Turns out he was just human. Flawed. Stubborn. Afraid of looking weak. Too proud to see that the son he underestimated was the son who kept the company alive. Arthur later told me my father was living modestly. Not struggling, not starving, just average. For a man like him, losing the company was worse than prison. He'd never say it, but it broke him. And yeah, some part of me still cared. Not enough to fix it, but enough to understand it. Meanwhile, Sean's downfall became an industry warning story. Competitors whispered about it at conferences. Employees at Parker, now Connolly's property, joked about pulling a Sean when someone misplaced the stapler. His sentencing made the local news. Connolly's lawyers sent regular updates. Defendant showed no remorse. Prosecution seeking maximum sentencing. Recommended 14 years. I didn't read the details. Didn't need to. What mattered was simple. He did this to himself. And my father let him. I wasn't responsible for their choices. Only my own. And I chose survival. Growth. A life beyond the wreckage. That's what winning really looks like. Not vengeance. Not destruction. 6 months after Sean's sentencing and 9 months after I walked out of Parker Industrial with my life in garbage bags, I woke up to something unfamiliar. A Saturday with nothing to fear. No panic. No dread. No survival mode brain checking exits. No exhaustion from juggling 3 crises at once. Just sunlight leaking through the blinds and the quiet hum of a life that finally felt mine. It took me a minute to realize how rare that feeling was. I made coffee in a kitchen I actually liked. Sat at a table I'd bought with my own salary. Looked out a window that wasn't cracked or fogged with mildew. For the first time in over a year, I breathed without feeling like the air was borrowed. I didn't hear from Sean. Prison doesn't allow much communication aside from heavily monitored letters. He sent one eventually. It arrived in a wrinkled envelope with handwriting that looked nothing like the confident, cocky brother I grew up with. Kai. I'm sorry for everything. I wish I could undo it. I wish Dad didn't believe me. I wish a lot of things. I didn't respond. Not out of hate. Just acceptance. You can't rebuild something that was never on solid ground. My father sent more letters than Sean did. Mostly small things. Updates about Arizona. Pictures of the golf course near his condo. Questions about how I was doing, questions he'd never asked when I worked under him. One letter caught me off guard. I'm trying to be better. Not for forgiveness, I know that's not owed. But because I realize now that I treated you the way my father treated me. And I hated him for it. I see it too late. But I see it. I folded that one carefully and kept it. Still didn't call him. Not yet. But the anger was gone. All that was left was distance, and maybe someday, enough space to talk. As for me? I thrived. Connolly fast-tracked me onto their leadership pipeline. Suddenly I was the guy people asked for advice, not the guy they ignored. I hired people. Managed teams. Built processes that actually worked. The same skills my father undervalued became the backbone of an entire division. One afternoon, during a strategy meeting, Adrian looked across the table at me and said, "Funny thing. If Parker Industrial had valued you the way we do, we never could have afforded to buy them." He meant it as a joke. But he wasn't wrong. My father lost the company because he couldn't see me. Connolly grew because they did. One night, after a long day at work, I found myself walking along the river, watching reflections ripple in the water. I pulled out my phone. Scrolled through contacts. Paused on my father's name. My thumb hovered over. Call. Not to rebuild. Not to fix anything. Not to pretend nothing happened. Just because, for the first time, I felt strong enough to choose forgiveness on my own terms. Not out of obligation, not out of guilt, not out of needing him. But because I was finally standing on steady ground. I didn't place the call. Not that night. Instead, I sat on a bench, let the wind carry away the last pieces of bitterness, and realized something important. Everything they took from me, I rebuilt. Everything I lost, I replaced with something better. Everything they tried to destroy became the foundation for something stronger. Rock bottom didn't break me. It refined me. And the life I had now wasn't owed to their approval or dependent on their choices. It was mine. Built from nothing. Built from survival. Built from truth. I walked home with a quiet, steady certainty. I don't need my father's forgiveness. I don't need Sean's apologies. I don't need the past to make sense. Because I won. Not in the loud, dramatic way I once imagined,